a fantastic speaker right at the beginning. Nimma notes, notepads, keep your eyes, your senses ready. We are all set to begin in the next few minutes. Mattomme request ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. People who are sitting at the back, please make your way to the front. Yes, I can see that you have just stood at your places. Do not hesitate. Make use of this space. It's all yours. And it'll be wonderful because the first session is going to start with a lot of presentations, visual treat. And it is best watched from the front seats. Thank you. ಆ ಕಡೆ ಕೂತಿರುವಂತಹ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಲ್ಲ ಅತಿಥಿಗಳು, please make use of this front space. And we shall begin in less than 10 minutes.
Is A2?
Not this time. No. Yeah. No, I think whoever I talked to suggested not to do it this time. Yeah. Anyway, I'll be around, but yeah. Unfortunately, I need to get home. We have little babies at home. Australia, yeah. I wanted to stay longer, but we have a 4-year-old and 2.
I'm going to try checking if my dhwani is reaching right up to the last row. Namaskara. Yes. It has reached because I could see people wave back at me. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬರಿಗೂ ಆತ್ಮೀಯ ಸ್ವಾಗತ, ಆದರದ ವಂದನೆ. ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ವಸಂತಿ ಹರಿಪ್ರಕಾಶ್. I am a journalist. I am very happy to be invited to present and be your Sutradhar. I'm the founder editor of Pickle Jar. We tell stories of a changing India. Could be web series, blogs, or podcast. I don't know how many of you are aware of podcasts. It's a very powerful tool. Today, what we are going to be witnessing on day 2 of the Global Investors Summit, Invest Karnataka, is another range of speakers who will present to you their views and thoughts. Before that, I'm going to take the stage, the podium, and tell you a little summary. Nenne illi nadidantaha ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಗಳ ಒಂದು ಸಂಕ್ಷಿಪ್ತ ವಿವರಣೆ for those who have missed it. So let's start. Meanwhile, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸೇರಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬರ ಚಪ್ಪಾಳೆಯ ಧ್ವನಿ ಮೊದಲು ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಲಿ. May I have a round of applause for all the speakers? ನೋಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಇದೇ ಒಂದು ಸಂಗೀತ. Because so many people have worked to make this happen and it's not easy at all. Yesterday was a busy day, and which is why our guests are taking some little time to be here, and they will be coming in and joining us during the day. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you are very well aware, the Global Investors Meet is a platform that brings together government, investors, and companies to explore the true potential of this state of Karnataka. The theme for this year's Global Investor Meet is Build for the World. I just want to ask a quick question on the Prashne Nimmalli. Nenne Sanjay, last evening, illi eshtu jana drone show na nodidri. There were about 500 drones. Yes, I can see a few hands go up. It was a beautiful display where you had 500 drones make a formation up in the skies. They looked like nakshatragalu, and it had the theme Build for the World. The idea is to showcase the state of Karnataka as the most attractive investment destination in India. Over the 3 days, that is beginning yesterday, the Global Investors Meet seeks to bring 80 inspiring talks, 30 insightful sessions, 6 country partners, 300 exhibitors, and the exhibitions are going on right in those stalls. I hope you take some time off to see that. Political and thought leaders focusing on the themes and sectors that are critical to Karnataka's growth story. There are about 5,000 delegates from all sectors. I will not go into details of that. On day 1 of this Global Investors Meet, we had the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi grace this unique platform and speak to us virtually about his vision of Karnataka as a catalyst for India's global aspirations. If you were here yesterday, you also heard the Minister for Finance, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, Chief Minister of Karnataka, Mukhyamantrigalu, Shri Basavaraj S. Bommai, and the Honorable Minister of Commerce and Industry, Shri Piyush Goyal. We also had industry leaders, Shri Rajan Bharati Mittal, Shri Karan Adani, Shri Rishad Premji, and Shri Vikram Kirloskar. Now, with day 2 of the Global Investor Meet, there are more thought-provoking and insightful sessions. Now let me come to the absolutely compelling beginning session of the day. And to set the context, India accounts for about 7% of global emissions. We have a growing population. I think there is, all of us are aware of that. The climate crisis is only likely to worsen. But India has come a long way. Sustainable development goals we are working towards. But to talk about India's pivotal role how do we arrest climate crisis? Inta ಒಂದು ವಿಷಯದ ಮೇಲೆ we are all set to have someone whose videos you might have watched, or if you have not, you can make sure that you look up the name Chadden Hunter, CHADDENHUNTER. ನಮ್ಮ ಮುಂದೆ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. Please join me with a round of applause for our very first guest of the day, Mr. Chadden Hunter. Chadden, over to you.
Vasanthi. Well, thank you, Vasanthi, for the warm welcome, and thank you to Times Group and Karnataka for inviting me here to speak today. As you might have heard, I get to do what I think is the best job in the world. I get to make wildlife films, nature documentaries, and I love doing it. Some of you might have seen some of these big nature shows on TV in India. What I want to do a little bit today is talk about whether these big, glossy, beautiful nature documentaries actually do anything to help the environment. But just to get us in the mood, I don't want to presume that all of you have seen these shows, so I just want to start with a couple of minutes from one of these films to get us in the mood and show you what I make. Here we go. So there, thank you. It's a bit of an indulgent way for me to start a talk, but I wanted to share those clips with you. Some of you might have recognized a few lovely Indian cities in there, Jaipur and Jodhpur, two of my favorite places. I wanted to show you that clip because I wanted to ask how that made us feel. Did that make you feel upbeat? Did it make you feel uplifted? Did it make you feel transported, like you'd forgotten that you were sitting in this room just for a few minutes? I want you to hold on to that feeling as we go through this talk, because I also want to ask this question about whether it is negligent of me as a filmmaker not to be talking about the trouble that some of those animals are in. That swimming pygmy sloth that we saw there is on the very edge of extinction, and some of those great caribou herds, the big migrating herds of animals, that might be some of the last footage we ever get of those animals because they're in such steep decline. So was it wrong of me not to be talking about the problems that they're facing while we enjoyed those beautiful imagery? Now, to answer this question about whether wildlife films do anything to help the environment, very much is my own story. And so if you'll bear with me, I want to take you back from where it starts for me. I was lucky enough to grow up in North Queensland, Australia. This is the tropics, a little not dissimilar to like we have here in Bengaluru. Lovely vegetation everywhere. In the tropics, you can leave your windows open and plants will grow through in a few days. Insects filling the kitchen. Just offshore was the Great Barrier Reef. So as kids, we were lucky enough to go swimming and snorkeling every school holidays. So for me, that immersion in nature surrounding me, had a real impact on me as a child. Like a lot of kids, I was out there in the back garden chasing creepies and crawlies and just fascinated by the wildlife that was in my own back garden. Now, you don't have to grow up in the tropics to have that fascination with wildlife all around you. I think a lot of us growing up everywhere have an interest in animals that we see locally. But something else happened to me when I was about the age of 7, and that was a TV show that came on. Now, I'm showing my age here, but this is in the late 1970s. 1979, a TV show came on called Life on Earth. Now, this was the first time that wildlife filmmaking had started to bump away from a dry textbook style and started to move into, I guess, a more entertaining type space by using more sophisticated camera work. And David Attenborough, this was the first time a lot of us had heard of David Attenborough, by using his incredible storytelling, we started to mesmerize and enchant an entire generation. My generation was so enchanted by this series, Life on Earth. My mother would describe me as a 7-year-old getting so excited by watching this TV show that I would climb up the back of my lounge room sofa and sit with my bum on the back of the sofa and my arms outstretched against the lounge room wall like I was being electrocuted. I was so excited to watch this TV. But I have no memory of watching Life on Earth like that, but that is how my mother swears that I watched Life on Earth. So that moment for me when I was about the age of 7 was when I realized I wanted to try to make this love of green things, this love of fluffy things, this love of wild things, try to make it into something that someone would pay me to do. So through a long journey through high school and university, maths and science, I ended up doing a PhD out here. This is the mountains of Ethiopia. Now, when you think of Ethiopia, a lot of people think of desert and famine, maybe to bump into Bob Geldof or somebody trying to save the world. Yet this is the highlands of Ethiopia in the middle of the wet season. It's absolutely beautiful. There are wildflowers everywhere, waterfalls coming off the cliffs. My mother really hates this photo, by the way. She cannot stand looking at it. But the reason that I had to stand on these sheer cliffs each day is that I was up there to study a very amazing animal that slept down on the cliff each night, and I was waiting for it to come up. And these were gelada baboons. They have these wonderful golden manes, like lion manes, that are golden colored, very silky and chocolate colors. This male is just showing off, by the way. They're not really as aggressive as they look. But they're very, very impressive animals. So these were my friends for the next few years. There I was, probably only 24 or something, living the dream. This, for me, was my Diane Fossey Gorillas in the Mist dream. I was up there in nature, talking to the animals. This is way above the tree line, by the way. This is 3,400 meters. And these are the only monkeys in the world that eat exclusively grass. There's no trees up there. So they shuffle across the mountains just grazing on alpine grass. But this created a problem. And I started to realize that in all the years that I was studying them, what I was doing in researching these monkeys was actually doing very little to help them. And the reason was that because they were grass eaters, they were sneaking in to neighboring barley crops and stripping the barley heads to get the seeds. Now, of course, the local farmers were really angry about this. And the farming lobby, which are quite powerful politically in a lot of countries, were up in arms. The shepherd boys had to try to get the gelada baboons out of their crops. It's a problem that a lot of Indian farmers have as well with crop raiding animals, and they're obviously asking the government to come up with schemes, like the Ethiopian government was coming up with a scheme to cull these gelada monkeys and asking me to try and help them kill the monkeys. So I realized I had to do more than just reach out to the few people around me. These are some of the local shepherd boys, and these are some of the poorest communities that I have ever seen in the world, and I've done a lot of traveling. So I had a lot of sympathy for the conditions that they lived in. These were friends of mine, these were my neighbors, these were people that had saved my life on a few occasions. So I really, really felt a strong connection. But I realized in trying to talk to them locally about the monkeys, it just wasn't enough. Now, I happened to be passing through Addis Ababa at the time. Addis Ababa is the capital of Ethiopia. And I had just enough Amharic, the local language, to get myself onto a TV chat show and talk about why the gelada monkeys were so special, why I had come from the other side of the world to study them. Most Ethiopians were like, "What are you doing? Why aren't you home with your farm?" Everybody, as Ethiopians assume that everyone is a farmer. And they thought it was crazy that this young Australian had come all the way across the world to study animals that they thought were just vermin or pests. The Ethiopians literally think that gelada baboons are animals like rats or cockroaches that everyone around the world is struggling with and trying to get rid of. So there I was on this little TV show trying to explain that these gelada monkeys were only found in Ethiopia. They're endemic to Ethiopia and absolutely special. Now, the result for me was a real epiphany. I was out on the street the next day and I had people come up saying, "Oh, you're that monkey man from TV. I saw you on TV last night." I had no idea that gelada were only found in Ethiopia. As I said, most Ethiopians think that they were just pests. And I realized that in that short TV appearance, I'd opened the eyes and the minds of a lot more people than just by doing my research. Up until that phase, I had no interest in TV whatsoever. I just wanted to be an academic biologist. But that appearance on TV was a complete light bulb moment for me. In the 4 years it took me to finish my PhD, probably 4 people ever read it. Well, let's say 3.5 people ever read it, because I don't think my dad ever finished it. But I can hardly blame him, because it was a very, very boring piece to get through. And yet the first film that I was able to make about these monkeys, probably 40 million, 100 million people around the world got to see that film. So that for me was a real revelation about the power of media, and especially the power of television, to move people and to get your message out there. So I started drifting into wildlife filmmaking at this stage, and my first opportunity to work outside of Ethiopia and Africa came on a series that some of you might have heard of. This was the original Planet Earth series. Now, this is going back to about 14 years ago now, but this was the first wildlife series that truly moved wildlife filmmaking away from documentary and truly took it into blockbuster entertainment space. This series was seen by 500 million people when it first went out on television, and is owned by more people around the planet than any other DVD, by a long, long, long way, possibly than all other DVDs put together. It's an amazing fact, isn't it? Some of you might have this at home, but to think that you have the chance to get your message into more homes around the planet than any other DVD is quite phenomenal in terms of reach, if you want to get a message out there. But what's remarkable about Planet Earth, some of you might remember it's 11 hours. There's 1 hour on deserts, 1 hour on mountains, 1 hour on jungles, goes through the habitats. 11 hours of television. And guess how many words in there, how many lines in the script are about conservation or the environment? Absolutely zero. Absolutely zero mention in 11 hours of television about the environment. Now that just blows my mind. And even more remarkable than that, guess how many viewers said anything about it? Remember, 500 million people saw it? Not one single message did we get from viewers anywhere on the planet about the fact that this didn't have any mention about climate change or sustainability or conservation. And TV critics as well, not one single word from a TV critic. So that really blows my mind to show you how much we've moved on in that 14 years. Now it would be utterly unacceptable for us to do major wildlife films without talking about the environment and about the green issues on the planet. Now fast forward 10 years and we get to Planet Earth 2. For the filmmakers, this was really, really terrifying because we had never serialized one of our brands before. We didn't think we were Die Hard 7 or Toy Story 5. We'd never taken a big BBC David Attenborough brand and rebooted it. So for us, the producers and directors, we were really, really scared that people would just be, oh, it wasn't as good as the first one. This is a really terrifying thing to have to make. But the reason that we decided to reboot that brand is that the technology had moved along enough in those 10 years. And I want to talk a little bit about technology because we are in Bengaluru after all. This is a kind of a tech hub of India. So I thought some of you in the audience might be a bit interested in some of the technology. So in those 10 years between Planet Earth 1 and Planet Earth 2, we thought that camera technology had moved along enough that we could take you, the viewers, back into those habitats and let you experience them in a new way. Some of you might remember Planet Earth was the first ever full HD TV series that the BBC ever made. And at that time, big TV companies like Sony and Panasonic would show Planet Earth on a loop in shop windows and try and convince you that you were a loser if you weren't buying you and your family an HD TV set. Well, fast forward 10 years, Planet Earth 2 happens to be the first series that the BBC ever made in full 4K. And guess what? You go into a shop window and Sony and Panasonic had Planet Earth 2 on a loop, trying to convince you that you were a loser if you weren't buying your family a full 4K television set. But we could also do things with those 4K cameras that we weren't able to before. We could take them into some really remote places. This is in Ladakh, India, another fantastic location where we could set up cameras with remote batteries and solar power so they could stay up there for months at a time. Some of you might remember in Planet Earth 1 there was a snow leopard hunt down a mountainside, but it was very, very telephoto. It was from a long way away. Well, with Planet Earth 2, when we took these remote cameras up into Ladakh and set them up, and they had a little infrared beam, so when the animal walks past, it triggers the beam, turns the camera on, we could get much more intimate images of those animals. You could actually hear this Indian snow leopard breathing. You could even hear the snow leopard peeing in some of these shots. It was so intimate. And that for us was our mantra in making Planet Earth 2. It was all about immersion. It was how do we make these stories feel more immersive for you, the viewer. Planet Earth 1, the tagline was, as you've never seen it before. For Planet Earth 2, the tagline was, as you've never experienced it before. We were able to also free the camera from the tripod and keep it moving. A lot of you are familiar with handheld phone gimbals now. You might use those little steady cams or see people using them with their phone. So that technology had finally become strong enough for us to use in wildlife filmmaking. Now, I'm not a cameraman, by the way. I'm not going to take any credit from any of my camera operator friends, but I was the only Muppet willing to sit on the front of this Jeep while I hurtled across the savannah. And all I had to do was hold these two handles. I didn't know what I was doing, but even though we were shaking around, these spinning gyro motors would keep that camera rock steady. So we were able to free the camera and let you, the viewer, travel in the footsteps of those animals as the animals might experience that habitat. Next time you're watching your favorite Bollywood film or DVD box set, look out for how many times that camera is moving. It's a device that we use in filmmaking to give things a bit more energy and a bit more emotion. And so we were using the moving camera a lot more in Planet Earth 2. Drones had also come along in leaps and bounds. Now, drones had been around for a long time, but they were really notorious and quite loud and quite big. They're finally becoming small enough and reliable enough that we could get them into more intimate locations. We also have thermal cameras that see heat instead of light. We could take a thermal camera to Mumbai, to the famous national park in Mumbai, and point it at pitch blackness where no human can see anything, but that camera can see the shape of the Mumbai leopards coming out of the darkness. So that's a little whirlwind of some of that technology. Now, the next clip I want to show you is a video that no one has seen outside of this setting. This is a very VIP treatment for you. It's never been on television, never been on the DVDs, but here is some of those toys in action. Yeah, sound good? which is sadly how many a drone flight still ends before you go rushing out and buying one for your kids. Beware. But so that is some of the technology and how that had moved along in 10 years in the wildlife filmmaking industry. I want to share with you some of those deeper stories behind the scenes now. This is one of my favorite expeditions, but this has never been seen on DVDs. This is to the Okavango Delta in Botswana. I was lucky enough to be working with a local cameraman who grew up there. He knows the Okavango Delta really, really well, so I knew I was in safe hands. We just went in his little boat. It was only the two of us. We're hundreds and hundreds of kilometers from anybody else, any help or anything. And he started realizing that the water was lower than we were expecting. We're expecting the Okavango flood to have come in by now. So it meant that we actually had to start getting out and starting to push this little boat through these swamps. Now these swamps are absolutely full of Africa's most deadly animal. I'm not sure if you can guess what it is. It's not a lion, but it happens to be hippo. Hippos kill more humans than any other animal in Africa, except maybe a mosquito for all these smart Alecs out there, but let's just say, of the large animals, it's the hippo. And we knew they were all around us. And as we're pushing this boat through, Brad, the cameraman, starts casually telling me this story about how a hippo had snapped his last boat in half. This exact same boat, same model, everything, it just snapped it in half with one bite. That is how powerful the hippo's bite is. As we went further on in the day, you can see the sun is getting lower now. Brad, eventually, as we get our motor all chewed up, says, "Oh, Chad, now you need to take your shoes off." And I'm like, "What do you mean I need to take my shoes off?" And he said, "Well, if you step down on the back of a crocodile with your shoes on, you won't feel it, and the crocodile will whiz around, rip your leg off, and you'll be dead in seconds. But if you take your shoes off with bare feet, you can feel the back of a crocodile really quickly, and you can whip your feet away." And I was like, Brad, how would I know what the back of a crocodile feels like? I've never done that. And he said, you'll know. Trust me, you'll know. When you step on the back of a crocodile with bare feet, you'll know. Your feet will instinctually pull away. So I probably aged about 10 years over those next 500 meters. Every single step was, oh my God, is that a crocodile? Oh my God, is that a crocodile? Oh my God, is that a crocodile? I'm almost disappointed that I actually didn't get to step on one now, but we had to go barefoot. Now, one of the very few things that I had out there was a small handheld video camera, one of those little ones with the flip-out screen. And what I tried to do was get a few making-of moments with that camera. This is the only few seconds that I was able to film before the cameraman told me to put the camera down and help. We have a hippo in the channel ahead of us. We're about, what, 6 Ks out from camp still?
Yep.
Still
And I'm not going anywhere fast.
No. So that was about all I was able to film there. As I said, we couldn't really do much with that. We couldn't make a full behind-the-scenes story. And so we put it out on social media, which again is another platform that we try to expand a lot of our smaller content into, like a lot of the corporations that you work for would do as well. So that expedition went on until after dark. We were absolutely ravaged by mosquitoes. Our legs got shredded by the swordgrass that we were trying to push through for the whole day. But all of those efforts, all of that adventure is why people in wildlife filmmaking love it. There's people that actually love being out in nature because we get to go on those expeditions to meet incredible animals like these at the end of the journey, the big male lion who'd just been in a battle. So to meet these animals face to face really is that reward. Now, another one of my favorite expeditions ever is to somewhere that some of you may know. This happens to be my second favorite Indian state of all time. Of course, Karnataka is my absolute #1 favorite state, as it is for everybody here in the audience, of course. But guess what? My number 2 favorite Indian state happens to be Assam. And this is absolutely gorgeous up there. This might look like just generic grass to you, but some of you might have heard of this very famous grass you have in India called elephant grass. And the reason elephant grass is called that is because it's the world's tallest grass. It can actually hide an elephant. Every Indian knows how big an Asian elephant is. Of course, you can see them on your streets. But to think that that grass, these are fully grown Asian elephants, and that grass is hiding them like they were mice coming out of the backdrop there. And these elephants are always looking for water. That's what drives elephants all the time. So they're pushing through this incredible landscape of grass to try and find their way to water. And as they push through that tall elephant grass, they actually create avenues for other animals. There are water buffalo in there, which can be quite dangerous. Sloth, bear, tiger. Oh, they've switched off the backstage vacuum. Fantastic. So there's a lot of animals in this tall grass, and they use those trails that the elephants forged to also find their own pathways. So it's a very, very beautiful landscape in there. It's somewhere that very few humans have ever explored because it's so dangerous. In fact, I think Kaziranga National Park happens to be one of the most deadly national parks on Earth in terms of the risk it poses to humans. And so there we were trying to get inside these tunnels. This is my good friend and local cameraman, Sandesh Kadur. Some of you might have heard of Sandesh. He lives here and he's a Bangalore hero, basically. So there we were trying to explore these grass tunnels in Kaziranga, trying to work out how on earth we were going to film the animals and keep our crew safe. We were being guided by some of these incredible forest rangers in Kaziranga, like a lot of the forest guards throughout India, doing an incredible job of protecting that national park. But you can see from this old rifle, that's going to do very, very little to stop a buffalo or a rhino or an elephant. The best that you can hope for is to make noise, to try and scare those animals away as you go through, to try and tell the animals that you're there. But we basically were trying to keep up with this guard, and often if you blinked or turned around, this was the last thing you would see before he would disappear. So here's a little video clip of what it looks like in those grass tunnels in Kazaranga.
Every time we go into these tunnels, we have to take an armed guard because there's so many animals in here that are dangerous. Tigers are probably the least of our worries.
Vacuum cleaner off?
But rhinos and buffalo,
What is
elephant, sloth bear, all of them can injure you, and we've got to keep up with our armed guard.
The team have bumped into their first obstacle.
There's a rhino right there.
Let's go back because it's too risky going through this heavy grass.
Let's get in the open. Another rhino.
Now we have two rhinos.
Let's get in here.
Okay.
The guard throws a ball of mud to one side of the rhinos, moving the animals on without harming them.
Okay, it's gone.
Okay. What about the other one?
No. All right, let's go quick.
So some of the adventures that you can go on if you go into the field with an Indian cameraman. So that was Sandesh and I in Kazaranga trying to film these fantastic Asian rhinos. And Kazaranga happens to be home to more Asian rhinos than the entire rest of the world put together in this small national park. And they are doing an incredible job of protecting them. It still blows my mind to think that you have a big border with China, and let's face it, a lot of the poaching happens because of Chinese medicine, and yet the protection that India is giving to its wildlife and rhinos like these is phenomenal compared to the poaching that's going on a lot further away in somewhere like Africa. But yet every now and then there is a tragic scene, and sometimes you do come across something that has been poached. This was a very, very rare occasion. As I said, the guards are doing an incredible job there, and they did catch these poachers, but that is one of the guards kind of on the scene. But it reminds you of some of the challenges that we still face and some of the stories that happen in the background. And we can't just go on pretending that they have these beautiful natural scenes without talking about that conversation. And India is doing a phenomenal job right now with this incredible green boom that you're going through. Prime Minister Modi is a real advocate of alternative renewable energy sources. A lot of your big industries, Reliance, Tata, Adani, are all putting a lot of money into green technologies, which is absolutely fantastic. I think it's one of the most amazing things that will transport our world from a world of using fossil fuels to a world of cleaner energies. I think India will really be leading the charge there, which is fantastic. We want you to stop buying dirty coal from my country, Australia. But anyway, I'm very, very proud of the efforts that the Indian government is making and Indian private sector is making in terms of that green revolution. Keep up the good work. So we realized as filmmakers that we had to do more than just pretend that this was pristine jungles and mountains and deserts anymore. We had to come up with some way of addressing that problem. So we decided to add a final episode to the end of Planet Earth 2. And this was about a habitat that we had never been into before. This was the urban world. This was the first time that us as filmmakers had ever been into that urban environment and used our same cameras and techniques to bring it alive. The urban habitat happens to be the fastest growing habitat on the planet, and we've just passed a tipping point where more than 50% of all humans now live in a city instead of outside of a city, which is quite remarkable. So we have to find a way of talking about that as an environment somehow. What we wanted to do along the way was to meet some of those incredible animals that have hacked the system, have learnt to live alongside humans. Some of you might know these beautiful langurs in the wonderful city of Jodhpur. This is one of my favorite Indian cities, and of course, you know, Hanuman is kind of revered here as well. So there are some animals that are doing a quite surprisingly good job of living alongside humans. But this next video clip, we also didn't want to shy away from the truth at all. So this next video clip I want to share with you is of one of those animals not doing so well alongside humans.
Roads bring many to their end. Hundreds get trapped in storm drains every night. Exhausted by the effort of traveling such a distance on land, this hatchling's chances of surviving the night are slim. This turtle is one of the countless species that have been unable to adapt to the change brought about by the urban environment.
So a very, very sad scene there, very, very emotional, and very, very hard to watch. A lot of our viewers were really, really upset by that sequence. We had a bigger response to that little story on social media than anything else in the entire series. Some of you might remember the famous snakes and iguana chase. That went viral around the planet. It was very famous. But we had a bigger response to these turtle hatchlings on social media than anything else across all the planet Earth too. And the reason was it was so upsetting to watch. Viewers really, really didn't like it. So if you were the filmmaker making this city's episode, where do you think you would put that turtle hatchling story in the film? Would you put it right up the front? Because a lot of people, if you watch these type of shows at home, you might watch them with your family on a Sunday night, or you want to forget about work on Monday, you might sit there and watch them with your family. If that was the first few minutes that came up of this film, how many of you think that someone in your house might be reaching for the remote control saying, Mom, Dad, you know what, I don't think I can watch 1 hour of this kind of emotion. It's very, very hard hitting. So that's the challenge for us as filmmakers. We're trying to weave in just enough to wake people up and make them care about the natural world, but not so much that we paralyze them with despair. I like to say that depression is not a great motivator. And this is one of the truths about wildlife filmmaking and these big, beautiful nature films, is that the vast majority of people come to watch them for escapism and entertainment. They don't actually come for the conservation or the education. They might be bonuses, but they really, really want to be entertained and want to have that feeling that I remember I talked about right at the front, that feeling of escapism, that feeling of being uplifted and awe-inspired. So it's a very, very fine balance for us as filmmakers, a delicate balance to work out how much of that big environmental message to weave in, but to still make people feel awe and wonder and joy about the natural world. I think probably a more eloquent way for me to wrap up here is with the last few lines that we wrote for David Attenborough in the entire Planet Earth series. And have a listen out for the last 3 words.
Down on this great metropolis, the ingenuity with which we continue to reshape the surface of our planet is very striking. But it's also sobering. It reminds me of just how easy it is for us to lose our connection with the natural world. Yet it's on this connection that the future of both humanity and the natural world will depend. It's surely our responsibility to do everything within our power to create a planet that provides a home not just for us, but for all life on Earth.
So there you go. And thank you. And if you heard those last few words that he mentioned there, life on Earth. And so I guess if I have one key piece of evidence to try to answer this question about whether these big, glossy wildlife shows actually do anything for the environment, it's the fact that we have a series like Life on Earth from the 1970s to thank for the fact that I'm standing here today and talking to you guys. So for me, I guess my hope and my dream in making these shows like Planet Earth and Blue Planet is that somewhere out there is that next generation of 7-year-olds that are getting so excited by watching these shows that they're climbing up the back of their lounge room sofas with their bum like on the sofa, their arms outstretched like they're being electrocuted, so excited watching these shows that they want to be that next generation of wildlife biologists and filmmakers. And so on that note, I want to thank you very much for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Chadden,
Thank you.
I want you to stay back on the stage for a
Oh,
moment,
sure.
please. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who have witnessed the talk by Chadden Hunter, seen the stunning visuals he has presented, did you like it? Then show it by clapping right above your heads for a guy who has traveled
thank you,
all
thank you.
this far from another continent.
Thank you.
Chadden, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Here we were sitting in Bengaluru, in this magnificent Bangalore palace, and you took us on a world tour to see the baboons at Ethiopia, the rhino at Kaziranga, our own state of Karnataka, Assam, and you're doing so much for planet Earth. It's an honor for us that you are here at the Global Investor Summit Karnataka. Mattomme chappaleya ಮೂಲಕ Chadden Hunter ಗೆ ಧನ್ಯವಾದವನ್ನ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ, may I now invite the Honorable Minister, Shri Murugesh Nirani. I am told he is here. Mr. Nirani, if you can please come on stage and felicitate and a token of gratitude for our very special guest who has come all the way from Australia. I also wish to invite the Additional Chief Secretary, Shri E.V. Ramana Reddy, to please come on stage. Chadden is a father of 3. He needs to
Yes.
go back to Australia. So how did you like Bangalore this time?
Oh, I love it. It's always lovely being back here. I jumped off the plane and ran straight for a masala dosa.
I hope you get to have more
thank you very
masala
much.
dosas.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, the very first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, Chadden Hunter,
Thank you so much.
who came for
Thank
us.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Nirani, as well as Mr. Ramana Reddy. Eager, the hall is looking even more beautiful. It's getting filled up. You might want to tell your friends who are standing outside. If I could have the mic, this podium mic switched on as well, please. ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ, ಆತ್ಮೀಯ ಸ್ವಾಗತ, ಹಾರ್ದಿಕ ವಂದನೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ. ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಮುಂದಿನ ಭಾಗ ಇನ್ನಷ್ಟು ಕ್ಷಣಗಳಲ್ಲಿ. While I wait and we set the stage for our very special guests who will join us in the next few minutes, maybe give ourselves a little more context. The lockdown, the pandemic that changed their lives, or life as we knew it, the world over, also brought to the forefront an unprecedented display of sharp business prowess. Everything's got to have a silver lining, isn't it? And a clearer understanding of market gaps, a deep focus on innovation, and the spirit of driving change. as the world returned to normal, ladies and gentlemen, who was it who were the change drivers focused on kick-starting the global economy anywhere in the world? It was the entrepreneur. May we hear it, a round of applause for all the entrepreneurs right here in this auditorium, in this space, and across the globe. Which is why today, a very special guest who's going to be speaking about innovation and entrepreneurship in the post-pandemic season, I'm going to be inviting on stage, but I'll take a moment to check with the organizers if we are ready indeed. I'm told they are ready, and therefore we have a thumbs up sign. Please join me in welcoming on stage the founder of Zuckerberg Media, Ms. Randy Zuckerberg, in conversation with the former India lead at Morgan Stanley, Sri Narayan Ramachandran.
Can you hear me at the back? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to introduce our guest, Randy, differently. She is, of course, the famous sister, and we will get to ask her questions about that soon. But before I do that, let me say to you that in addition to all the accomplishments that you see in your packets, Randy is a mother of 3 children. She's a Web3 entrepreneur, and she is the author of 5 books, 3 nonfiction books, and 2 children's books. The latest of these books, written a few years ago, is called Pick 3, and has an unusual angle to it, which is, can I call it prioritized imbalance or lopsidedness or whatever you like. So we'll get back to the topic of that book in a short while. But I want to begin by asking Randy, is this your first trip to India, Karnataka, Bangalore, and what are your impressions?
Thank you. Well, first of all, it is such a pleasure to be here, and I hope that you're not feeling too disappointed that you've gotten the other Zuckerberg today. But hopefully by the end of our time together, you'll forget that that other guy even exists at all. But I've actually traveled extensively around India, but this is my first time in this region. So I'm delighted to be here after so many years of having remote work with the Facebook office here, with so many investments and global partners. It's really a delight to actually be here in person. I was supposed to travel here a few years ago, but of course with the global lockdowns, this is my first time back in the country. So what a delight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to tell you that Karnataka, beyond the Bangalore that you know from your Facebook days, Karnataka offers, wildlife, the topic of the conversation that just went by. Karnataka offers architectural wonders, food from, a variety that's just amazing. So please do come back and make sure that you experience the state in its fullest splendor.
Yes, thank you. Well, now I have a lot of new friends here.
So let me try to set the context with a couple of your experiences, if I may. And I'm going to begin in the Zuckerberg household. I'm sure some of us would like to get a little glimpse into how it was. So think of this little place just a little bit north of New York City where you grew up with, was it 3 other siblings, 4 of you?
Yes. For a big household.
Big household, yeah. And your father was a dentist and your mother was a psychiatrist.
Yes, 2 doctors. So growing up in a Jewish family is very similar to growing up in an Indian family, as I've been told.
So tell me more about how that is so, and what lessons of entrepreneurship were evident, maybe post facto, but evident after the fact, in your household in New York State?
Yes. Well, so to set the scene for everyone, my father's dental office was the ground floor of our home, and then we lived right above it. So I got very used to the sounds of a dental office, but if I ever had friends over to visit, they would jump out of bed in fear at the sound of a dental drill going off at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be like, don't worry, that's just the dentist's office. But I guess that maybe that's not a normal childhood to have those sounds. But growing up with two parents who were both doctors who loved science and medicine, we discussed innovation all the time in our household. We were always discussing new research breakthroughs. My parents were always experimenting with new technology and reading really interesting developments in their field. So we were all very lucky to grow up in a household that valued science and valued innovation and research from a young age. And I would go and work in my dad's office after school and on the weekends, so I was exposed to all of that from a young age.
So there is this report of your brother Mark having built a messaging system for the household. Is this actually true? And did you participate in it? And
Yeah,
did you send it?
he was always building crazy things, and my dad was always trying out the latest devices alongside of him. I remember I came home one day from school, and my dad had this giant setup of multiple computers, and he was like, Randy, you sit here, Mark, you sit here, and then I'm going to switch your smiles. Now today you can do that with an Instagram filter and a Snapchat filter. It took a giant computer setup to do that back in the 80s, but that was the kind of household that we grew up in. So you can see how a lot of the things that my brother went on to build, that I've gone on to build, started at that early age.
So I think the message to everyone is there is no specific kind of household, but whichever household you're in, engage the curiosity and the exploration, and you can become an entrepreneur of the type of Randy and Mark and others.
I mean, I think the one thing that I will give my parents credit for is that it would have been very easy for both of them to try to force all of us into medicine. That's what they knew. But I think they realized very early that the careers that we would have didn't even exist yet. And so they really had a value in our household, like you said, of being open-minded and curious and being open to new careers that would come about. And I really, now that I'm a mom myself, I really appreciate that.
Terrific. So fast forward a few years, you got this call to go from the East Coast to the West Coast to the United States. You expected it to be a very short duration thing.
Yes.
You ended up staying for, was it 10 years or so at Facebook?
Yeah, so just to give a little background, I graduated from Harvard University, which I know is an obnoxious thing to say, but that other Zuckerberg didn't graduate from there, so I feel like I have to brag a little. I actually really loved music. That has been my passion my whole life, but again, Jewish parents, so I decided to focus on business instead. And I wound up at an ad agency after college where they were starting this tiny startup inside the ad agency called digital marketing. I didn't know what that was. No one knew. And I suddenly found myself in the heart of the growing internet business in the early 2000s. And so when I got a call from my brother saying, hey, Randy, I have this little company I'm building out in Silicon Valley, I could really use someone who knows digital marketing, I decided to help him out. And I thought I would be out in Silicon Valley, as you mentioned, for a few days, giving him some advice, and I was so excited by the entrepreneurial culture that I found out there that I ended up staying for more than 10 years.
And tell us about Facebook Live, how you came upon the idea, and I take it you're sort of the author of Facebook Live, so tell us a little bit about Facebook Live and how that happened.
Sure.
And perhaps it has some implications for all of us who hope that one day we will become entrepreneurs like you did. So.
Absolutely. Well, for any of you who have picked up a phone and live streamed, I'll tell you how it got started. When I joined Facebook, there were about 12 people. We were a tiny little company, and we had a lot of the same issues that startups around the world have, where it's hard to find resources, to hire people. Innovation is tough when you have only 12 people and you're already stretched very thin. So we would do these hackathons where everyone in the company, and then we would invite people around Silicon Valley to come and just work on dream projects and pitch them. And so at one of these hackathons, this was back in 2010, the iPhone had recently come out. I know you're very familiar with Apple. And I started to dream about a world where every single one of us is a movie studio and every one of us is a production company. So at one of these hackathons, I decided I wanted to try to live stream, only you couldn't do that from your phone in 2010. I had to have 4 guys wearing giant backpacks of technology, and I was able to stream live, interviewing people at the hackathon, and I thought, this is gonna be so amazing. And then only my mom and dad watched. That's it, 2 people. And I got so bummed out, I left the hackathon early. I didn't even stay to present the idea. And I thought, Facebook Live is dead. But a few weeks later, I got a call from a top talent agency in LA, and they said, you know, we saw that Facebook is launching a television show. We want some of our celebrities and our pop stars to go on it. And that started a whole I realized that day that there were so many celebrities, personalities, business organizations that really wanted to connect with their fans and their audience on a deeper level. So we did the first ever Facebook Live broadcast in 2011 from Facebook's headquarters. And about 6 years later, the technology finally caught up, and a live streaming button launched to 2 billion people around the world. So it was an exciting journey, but it also is a reminder that anything that looks like an overnight success probably took many years of hard work in order to get there.
Terrific, yeah. So now I'm going to forward a little bit further.
Perfect.
and ask you the question about what some of the entrepreneurs in the room, particularly those who are exposed to venture capitalists from Bangalore, will know, and it's called the pivot.
Yes.
So tell us about your pivot. You got a call from someone that changed your life completely again.
Yes. Well, I mentioned a few minutes ago that my dream was to study music. And I kind of gave up on that dream early in life, even though it was my passion. And out of the blue, I was in my early 30s. I got a call in my living room from the producers of a Broadway show, an 80s rock musical on Broadway, asking if I wanted to come star in their musical. They were looking for a technology personality who could sing. And so after all of that, after going to college and wanting to study theater but not, and having this 10-year journey in Silicon Valley, I moved back to New York City and actually starred in a Broadway show for several months. I know that is a wild career pivot to go from the front lines of Web 2 and social media to being an actress. But it gave me a totally new perspective. I had been building tools for creators for the last decade without ever actually being a creator myself. And once you walk in the footsteps of an actual creator, it opens your eyes and your mind up a lot to the opportunity there. So it really fed. I like to say that I have an entrepreneur brain and an artist heart.
Terrific.
Thank you.
That's the best combination. So I'm going to do something that I hadn't scripted, and I don't think I even scripted with you. Since we're live, can you sing us a note?
Oh, Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, we have not had enough to drink, I don't think, for this to happen, but let's go for it. My big solo was Hit Me With Your Best Shot from the 80s. So, hit me with your best shot. Why don't you hit me with your best shot? Fire away.
Terrific. Thank you. I was just taking.
I don't think that might be a first, like a investing business conference to be like belting out 80s rock music on stage. I love it.
I just got excited with the word live and said I might as well experiment with a little bit. So thank you for that, and sorry for putting you on the spot.
Next time I have to have a vocal warm up backstage.
We'll get you warm water and the whole thing, and we'll invite you back to do the whole show. But there are a few serious people in the audience, so let me ask you one or two serious questions.
Perfect. I can do serious also.
Okay. So tell me what innovation means to you, what entrepreneurship means to you, and do you see a distinction or they sort of coexist?
Yeah. I love talking about innovation, and I think there are several kinds of innovation. There's innovation where you are actually taking the time to sit and think about the future and actively plan for developments in the future. But then there's the realistic kind of innovation that most of us find ourselves in because we're so busy, and that is the innovation that you're forced to do because the world is suddenly changing around you. So if I can share a story that I think was one of the most pivotal moments, I remember the exact day the iPhone launched because it completely changed everything in Silicon Valley. A month before that, we had 90% of our customer base on desktop and laptop computers. 2 months after the iPhone came out, 50% of our user base was on mobile. And very few Silicon Valley companies even knew what to do with mobile. No one had engineers who were trained in building mobile apps. And so about half the companies in Silicon Valley said, we're just gonna wait this out. We're gonna wait for normal to come back. And about the other half of companies said, no, this is the new normal and we need to innovate and change our business. And I'm smiling as I say that because that's the same language people used during the pandemic. Many years later, people either said, we'll wait for life to go back to normal, or no, we'll innovate to the new normal. And it made our business so much better to retrain in mobile and prepare. But that wasn't innovation that we had planned for, but it was, we suddenly found ourselves in a world that had changed overnight. And that was such a pivotal moment for me in my career. And so I think when the global pandemic happened, it felt like a familiar moment. So I think a lot of innovation really happens as reactions and the resourcefulness of humans to react to major changes around us.
So maybe we can go there for a minute since the title has the word post-pandemic in it.
Yeah.
What do you think are the biggest sort of adaptations that people will need to make in the years to come, beyond the obvious? I mean, we get a lot of writing about work from home and stuff like that, but
yes.
Beyond that, what do you think, what kind of mindset do people need to exist in this new world?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I can't say enough how glad I am that we are back in person. I think we all hit a point where if we had to do one more video conference chat, we were all just going to lose our minds, and it's so wonderful to be back in person with other people. But I think we really saw every industry changed. The global supply chain just was massively disrupted. It caused so many industries to rethink manufacturing and shipping and the supply chain. Entertainment shifted overnight. People no longer went into movie theaters. They consumed entertainment in totally different ways. Education, I think we saw around the world how broken the education system, how much we rely on schools for not just educating our kids, but babysitting them and socializing them. And so when schools shut down, everything shuts down. Women dropped out of the workforce in alarming rates around the entire world. And so these are not just things that go back to normal overnight. These are all things that every industry we're still reeling with the repercussions of and still figuring out what to do in this changing world. Some of the change has been exciting for a lot of industries. Some of it has been devastating. I watched as my beloved theater industry shut down. We also all watched as the pharmaceutical and health industry exploded. So I think, we're just now starting to see some of the massive change that's come from the past few years.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask you why you write books and how you write books. And we'll get back to what you write in the books in a minute. But
yes,
why books and how books? And how does that, if it does, relate to the topic of entrepreneurship?
Yes, and I know it feels so anti-tech to have a physical written book, but I think, there's something so beautiful about being able to work on something and pour your heart into it and then actually be able to hold it in a tangible way. A few of the reasons why I really wanted to write, to connect with people, I love being on the front lines of new technology, but I also appreciate that there's a lot of challenges with any new industry. There's a lot of complications. For example, I spent a decade in Silicon Valley being pretty much the only woman in every room that I was in. And I don't know if we're having some trouble with the audio sound here, but for me, that was something that I dealt with that was so complicated that I really wanted to dedicate a big chapter of my career to making sure that anything that I wrote or said was very accessible, especially to women and to girls. That's actually how I got into writing children's books. I never set out to be a children's book author. In fact, I didn't even have children of my own yet when I wrote my first children's book. But I started to do a lot of research about why there are no women in the room in technology. And my research found that we lose girls at 9 years old. That's when they start to turn away from STEM fields. And so I thought, okay, I guess I have to write children's books and I have to focus on 9-year-old girls just as much as I'm focusing on women. So that's how I started writing, and I found it to be it's a beautiful thing when you can connect with someone who's read something that you've written and that you've poured your heart into that way.
So in India, we talk a lot about balance. And if I were to paraphrase the summary of your book called Pick 3, I don't know exactly what phrase to use. Prioritized balance or prioritized imbalance? Why don't you tell us about picking 3 and why that's important for everybody, but in particular for entrepreneurs?
Sure, and I really struggled when I became a parent myself because I was struggling with having a very, very busy and meaningful career at Facebook and in technology, and then also wanting to be a great mother. And so I started talking to other people, and I realized that everyone struggles with it, not just women, not just entrepreneurs. And so my book basically is sadly about the fact that work-life balance doesn't exist for anyone. I tried to find one person who said that they had it figured out, and I couldn't. But what I did realize is that the happiest, the most successful people, the people who were really operating on just an incredible new level, were people that were okay being well lopsided instead of being well balanced, that they were people who had gotten okay with the fact that they could really prioritize and be great in a few areas of their life instead of trying to be amazing at everything and falling short in all areas. So I started to dig into this philosophy of being well lopsided and, what does that mean? And I after interviewing almost 100 people for my book, I came up with a mantra that goes like this: work, sleep, family, friends, fitness, pick 3. You don't get to pick all 5 of those things. You can switch. You can constantly be switching which 3 things you're prioritizing. But in any given moment of your life, you can really only do a few things excellently. And all of the people, I guarantee that every single one of us, when we think about the things we've done that we're proudest of in our lives, the memories that we will tell our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they're all times when you've allowed yourself to really go all in on one or a few areas of your life. So that really changed my philosophy of work-life balance, and it's something that I strive to do now, is to be able to really prioritize that way.
I recommend to you Randy's book called Pick 3, so please take a look. It's somewhat of an unusual take on the whole idea of work-life balance. It's very different from what you hear from everyone, that so long as you focus on it, you can have it all. But here's a different take, so please take a look if you're interested. I'm going to switch to a topic that's dear to your heart, and you mentioned it very briefly, which is the role of women in entrepreneurship, and in particular in our state here, in India at large. Women are just joining the workforce in meaningful numbers, and I think they're all looking for the catalyst that will get them there.
Yes.
So tell us what it takes beyond the village, the famous village, for women to be encouraged into working, but more importantly, into entrepreneurship.
Yes. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm very encouraged to see so many incredible women in business here. And one of the things that I like to think about is not only how women can catch up in existing fields, but also how we get more women on the front lines of emerging fields. Because if women miss out getting in at the very early stages of emerging fields, we're just going to be having the same conversation 10 years from now in how do women catch up in AI, in blockchain, in some of these new emerging industries. So I think we really have to approach this in 2 ways. We have to make sure that in existing organizations, we're making the workforce friendly for women to catch up and enter. But we also have to make sure that women aren't left behind. And recently, I've grown very excited about Web3, which is the intersection of cryptocurrency, blockchain, and the metaverse. And one thing I noticed, again, I found myself in yet another iteration of the internet where there were no women in the room. I started that way in the early days of Web 2 and social media, and we made great progress over 20 years with amazing female founders and women entering social media and Web 2. And now here I found myself in Web 3. It felt like going back in time. And so I've been also trying to work to get a lot of women to be on the front lines of these exciting emerging fields so that we are not playing catch up again in the future.
I think I'm proud to tell you, I don't know whether this is an actual fact, but I believe it might be, that our state, Karnataka, probably has among the largest number of female engineers of any state in India. So I hope...
Wow, that's amazing. Really something to be proud of. I think also, I know there's a lot of investors in the audience today, and we talk a lot about venture capital and investing. I don't know the numbers in India offhand, but I know in the United States they are very bleak for investing in women. Less than 2% of investing capital in the United States goes to female founders, and that number even went down during the pandemic. Also, when I say that number, that's mostly white women who look like me. That's not women of color and diverse women. So it's pretty bleak state of funding for women. And I think that's certainly something that needs to change, and a mindset that needs to change. If we're going to have more women have a seat at the table, we need to invest in women earlier in the process.
So before I get to the topics of future, since you mentioned venture capital, what do you see in the venture capital industry, given that you're now a Web 3.0 entrepreneur? Do you see that capital is available and waiting, or do you see that capital is scared, or that capital is just gone?
It's an interesting question, and I have a little bit of deja vu from the early days of social media, because it took a long time for Web 2 to catch on as well. I would say that it took almost 5 to 10 years for social media and Web 2 to go mainstream, from the very first social networks and the things that were launched until it became a part of everyone's lives around the world. And so I think we're at a similar moment with Web 3, where we're so early that the kind of capital that's coming in, you really have to be thinking 5, 10, or more years in the future, because the adoption just isn't there right now. But so it's almost like when you're touring a house and you have to imagine what that home will look like when it's fully furnished and when your family lives there. It's hard. Not everyone has that vision. And that's a lot of what's going on in Web3 right now. So you do have some very passionate investors who feel like they can envision what the house will look like in 5 years. You also have a lot of people who are scared, who want to wait and see, who aren't sure what the future of the internet looks like that way. So I think all of those approaches are valid. There's certainly been a lot of ups and downs with cryptocurrency and NFTs. There have been some really exciting things. There have also been a lot of bad players in the space that have ruined the reputation of the space for a lot of the good innovation that's happening. And it will need some time to shake out. So the capital is there if you're willing to look hard enough and you're willing to find people that share a long-term vision. But it will take, it's not going to be immediate gratification. These things don't get built tomorrow.
Again, in Bangalore, there are a lot of, TikTok type of firms, some of whom I presume are represented here, who are sort of the kings of the Web 2.0,
Yes.
potentially making this transition to Web 3.0. And I think you met some yesterday, but we also have all the venture capitalists in India, or many of the venture capitalists in India are here. Some of the growth capital guys are distributed in Bombay as well, but the venture capital industry is substantially present in this city. So in that sense, it's very much a mixture of Palo Alto and Sand Hill all in one city, so for us.
Yes, it's very exciting, and I think even very lucky in a way, because in the US, the tech industry is really spread out over several cities. You have Austin, Texas, Silicon Valley, New York, Miami are all hubs. It's actually very lucky to have a technology hub that's all centered around one place. And I was very fortunate yesterday to be able to tour several venture capital offices and entrepreneur and meet with quite a few people in the ecosystem that I could pack into one day. And I was really blown away by just how much the infrastructure has improved since the last time I've traveled here. The payments and commerce, how it's exploded, and really just the entrepreneurial spirit is very exciting.
Since you engaged your creative soul, let me ask you, what do you think the future of NFTs is?
Yeah.
And is it, I less from a technical point of view and more from the point of view of society, what role might NFT play, if at all?
Yes. Well, a lot of the work that I do in this space, and I run a company called Hug, which is one of the biggest creator communities. So we have a lot of artists who have built a big following in Web 2 or creating physical art that are curious about Web 3. So they've come to join us for education and to dip their toe in that water. And there's a few reasons why artists are really loving Web 3. A lot of artists, they might sell a painting, but they never really know who they've sold it to. Or a gallery sells it and they never see their work again. They don't know if it wound up in an office or someone's house, or if it traded hands 5 times with family members. They just don't know. But with Web3, we're starting to see artists that are building really meaningful relationships with collectors. They suddenly have their own community. And on the collector side, we all have an expertise in something. Maybe you're the kind of person who recommends restaurants. Maybe you have great taste in music, and all of your friends come to you for that. You could give them advice, and you look cool. People think it's awesome. You give great advice, but there's no upside for you in that advice. Whereas with Web3, if you discover an artist or a musician or a business early, you actually participate in the upside as that business or that artist gains in popularity. So we're starting to see, with Web 2, it's very one-sided. Creators broadcast out to fans, and the fans just passively consume it. Whereas with Web 3, we're seeing these meaningful communities where creators and fans are working together and participating in the upside of a business together. And that's not something that I've really ever seen. Again, we're very at the early days, but that for me was the glimmer of excitement that got me to dive all in on Web3 right now.
I think if all of you were to take something away, can I paraphrase and say that Web3 will come?
Yes.
We're still in the very early stages, but it will have implications that sort of boggle the mind today.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at how the creator economy has exploded over the past few years. We now have hundreds of millions of people around the globe who participate making content. If you talk to young kids today, they'll tell you they want to be a YouTuber or they want to go into esports and gaming. And so that train has left the station. This young generation, they are thinking of themselves growing up as content creators, and they will want to monetize that, and they will want to own their audiences. And so it's just a matter of time before the creator economy takes on this new level.
So I'm going to give you the last word of a message to everybody from New York or from California, from the famous Zuckerberg family. What would you like to leave our audience with? And then with that, we'll close.
Gosh, well, I guess what I'd like to say is that when I got on that plane out to California to work at my brother's little company, I didn't think of myself as an inventor or as a creator. I thought of myself as a marketer behind the scenes who was helping someone else with their vision. But once I was exposed to a culture of entrepreneurship and innovation, here I am sitting here almost 20 years later, having founded multiple companies of my own now and doing things that I never dreamed of when I got on that plane. So for any of us sitting out there who have an entrepreneur brain and an artist heart, I truly can't wait to return here to this region and to see the amazing things that all of you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I'd request our esteemed guests to stay back for a moment. Randy, you need to be right here, center stage. I think the vivacious and vibrant speaker that we've had today deserves a special round of applause. Thank you for the session. And of course, lots of love coming your way. May I request the Minister, Shri Murugesh Nirani, to please step up on stage and offer a token of gratitude both to Randy as well as Mr. Narayan Ramachandran, who moderated and steered this conversation so well. So, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬರಿಗೂ ಮತ್ತೊಮ್ಮೆ ಸ್ವಾಗತ. There are new people who've joined in since morning. It's delightful to be able to see you. There are more sessions that await us, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. But meanwhile, I can see Sri Ramana Reddy as well as Mrs. Gunjan coming up to extend their token of gratitude to Randy Zuckerberg, founder of the Zuckerberg Media, who has come here as our very special guest at the Global Investors Summit, ladies and gentlemen. as the conversation goes on, let me remind all of you who are viewing this and you wish to post on social media, there are hashtags called Make in Karnataka, hashtag Build for the World, and hashtag KGIM. Lots of pictures and photo moments for you to take back. Lots of food for thought as well. And we would like to thank Randy Zuckerberg for coming to Bangalore for this very special summit. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, after that very vibrant session, let me tell you a few things that are happening on different parallel stages. At 1:30 p.m. in Audi 2, please make a note, Hall 2, we will see a dynamic Indo-French investor interaction on the various opportunities for growth and challenges across sectors, along with SME investment experience being shared by eminent dignitaries, and that's a very interesting session one can vouch for. You can also come back to the same plenary hall where we are. Illi nadiyuವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ, Drum Jam by Bangalore's very own Vasundhara Das, and it's going to be facilitated by Roberto Narayan.